The long-awaited Batman movie is finally here. And the question that everyone is asking is, was it worth the wait? Is it worth all the hype? I have to admit, when I first heard about this movie, I was pretty excited like everyone else, basically. I mean, the Batman is probably the most likable, probably the favorite of all of superheroes around the world, to many people around the world. Probably because his character is very unique. He's a very distinguished superhero. He is dark, gloomy. There is an eerie aspect about him. Not to mention that he is one of those superheroes that actually lacks any superpowers and relies only on his intelligence and his skills. So the Batman movie starts out very, very well. It sets up the mood for us with the crime-filled, dark atmosphere of Gotham City. We also see Batman literally emerging out of the dark and out of the shadows to fight crime and to save Gotham City and protect it. That immediately engaged me into the film. We later also find out that there's a sadistic serial killer who is terrorizing Gotham and leaving behind riddles. We immediately see Batman working together with Inspector Gordon, played magnificently by Jeffrey Wright. I thought this is one of the best characters in the film, and his pairing with Batman was one of the best. I think the chemistry between the two actors and subsequently the characters was excellent. These scenes, these enriched scenes of detective work displayed by the pair was the highlight of the entire movie for me. The other highlight of the film was the soundtrack. I thought they made a fantastic soundtrack paired with the film. They had some eerie, dark beats throughout, which really added to the gloom, added to the darkness of the scenes. See, I think if you want to make a new movie based on a very well-known and lovable character, you have to come up with something fresh, something new, something special. So again, apart from that detective work, the dark soundtrack, I found that Batman was severely lacking in terms of originality or bringing something special to the table. Sure, casting a new actor as Batman is always intriguing for anyone. I mean, even when James Bond actor is changed, there's always hype about it. And I think this is part of why this new release of Batman has so much hype. It's because of Robert Pattinson. Now, Pattinson does a very, very good job, but I think he adds nothing really special to the formula. I mean, any actor with the right characteristics would have done just as a good job as Pattinson did. So really nothing special about Pattinson, and we immediately accept him as Batman, but again, it adds nothing new to the formula. While I was surfing the net, I read a lot of reviews about the Batman, and a lot of the reviewers pointed out that the Batman took a somewhat similar route to movies like Seven, like Zodiac, in terms of darkness, in terms of suspense. And while that is partly true, I think the Batman was not as dark, not as brutal as these movies. And the reason why is because of the PG-13 rating. In my personal opinion, if the Batman was rated R, I think it would have been much more darker. It would have been brutal, and it would have been more fitting to the overall atmosphere. That was the objective of this film. I'm pretty sure the executives and the producers behind this film had so many meetings and discussions about the rating of this film, and they opted to go with the PG-13 rating. And we all know why was that. Zoe Kravitz plays Selina, aka Catwoman. I particularly did not find her character enjoyable nor her storyline entertaining. It was basically boring, slow, and added nothing to the overall story. Even the chemistry between Batman and Catwoman was lacking here. There was no depth. There was no emotional connection. Even when they were kissing, I felt that the kisses were forced. So really, the Catwoman storyline and plotline and subplot was really one of the worst in the movie for me personally. Other actors, for example, Colin Farrell, played Ozzy, aka the Penguin. Again, his character lacked depth. Didn't invest a lot of time building his character. He was just an ordinary mob guy with a mysteriously disfigured face. We don't know why that is. And for some reason, he talks like a gangster from let's say, a TV show like The Sopranos. And then what about his looks? I mean, why do you need to cast an actor for a role and then add makeup, prosthetics to transform him physically into a different character? Why not go out and cast someone who can look physically like the characters you're looking for? I mean, unless you're casting an A-list character, let's say Robert De Niro or Leonardo DiCaprio, no offense, Colin Farrell, then maybe that is justified. But Colin Farrell and then adding makeup and transforming him into a different character, I don't see the point. Anyways, he does a good job in portraying someone like a gangster, but again, I didn't feel like it was the Penguin. I didn't have the sense that this is a villain that we are all familiar with. The highlight of his subplot or storyline is definitely the car chase, which was one of the highlights of the film. Again, one of the good action scenes in the movie. Now, did you all pay attention to the Maserati the Penguin was driving? Oh, the Riddler storyline was a much more entertaining storyline. As I mentioned earlier, the whole detective work displayed by Batman and Inspector Gordon was the highlight of the film in general, and probably is what added a little bit of special and new and fresh look to this Batman movie, but it wasn't enough. There wasn't enough scenes of that sort. And so back to the Riddler, I think he is my favorite of all the villains in this film. However, I think they could have worked a little bit more in his looks. I mean, yes, he wears a mask, but there was nothing special about it. Actually, he reminded me a lot with Scarecrow from Batman Begins. I mean, be a little bit creative, add something different to his looks, something that could identify him as the Riddler. Yes, the riddles are fun and everything, but add something more. Talking about the villains, what I like most about Batman, and I think a lot of people, and I did mention this earlier, that a lot of people love Batman because of the characters. I mean, the characters are rich in terms of mental subnormality, in psychological trauma. Let's take the Riddler, for example. What can we diagnose him as? I mean, he's always laughing, he's always leaving riddles, and I think he suffers from a delusional disorder. He is delusional, he believes in certain things that are not true, and he's trying to act on them, and that's what I like about him. When it comes to Joker, now we know the Joker is not in this film, or is he? The Joker, what can we diagnose the Joker as? I mean, definitely he's a psychopath. He does have an antisocial personality disorder, but in addition to that, I do feel like he has grandiosity. He has, he always dresses in bright and different colors. I feel like he could suffer from a hypomania or a mania, which could diagnose him as bipolar. It's a possibility. The Penguin is your typical gangster here in this film. In the comic books, again, he suffered a trauma, so maybe he has some sort of a defense mechanism to this trauma that he suffered from, but I can't find a definite diagnosis for him. Going to Catwoman, I think Catwoman should or might fit into someone who has a personality disorder, probably a borderline personality disorder. She often is impulsive. In this film, unfortunately, she doesn't seem to fit any diagnosis I found, and that's why, again, I thought the characters in this film, the Batman, lacked so much background and depth. Coming to the Batman, what does the Batman have? Do we think he has a diagnosis? Does he has a mental problem? We know that when he was younger, he was traumatized by the death of his parents or the murder of his parents. So probably he has a post-traumatic stress disorder. He did have in previous comic books and films recollection of the trauma. He has nightmares. He avoids certain things, but then instead of avoidance, he then transforms and uses some sort of defense mechanism and goes out there and faces the trauma. And that's what I like about Batman. He is one of those who actually battled his psychological fears. He actually faced them and he actually confronted them. Another problem he had, we know, is that the fear of dark and fear of the bats. He has phobia from bats. And again, he transformed that and he embodied these fears and he reflected them and projected them onto others. And so the difference between Batman or any superhero and a villain is that they both go into a trauma, they all suffer a trauma, but then the way they react to this trauma, the way they use some defense mechanism which are known in psychology, is what identifies their characters and ultimately their diagnosis. Andy Serkis was cast as Alfred, and again here the chemistry between Batman and Alfred was severely lacking. This is one of the backbones of any Batman story, any Batman movie or comic book. The backbone chemistry arc is between Batman and Alfred. If you ruin that, then you ruined an important part of what Batman is. I mean, generally speaking, in this film, I thought the emotional investment was lacking. I didn't care less about any of the characters. So, if not for building up characters and building up tension, what was the 3 hours runtime for? I mean, even Gotham City itself lacked character. That setting, that atmosphere that they worked on in the beginning of the film suddenly vanished, and Gotham City ended up being like any other city. I mean, the previous films, especially those from the 90s, had a more superior set designs when it comes to Gotham City and how to reflect it. And so back to the question, what were they trying to achieve in terms of introducing something new, something fresh to the Batman? I mean, if you look at the villains, the plot, there was nothing spectacular or special there. What about the action scenes? Well, there was that very good, very well executed chase scene, but generally speaking, the action was minimal and far between. What about the darkness and brutality? While yes, it was there, it wasn't as intense. It was lacking tension because of the PG-13 rating. So I was thinking, again, what were they trying to introduce here? I think they were trying to focus on Batman himself. They were trying to display for us Batman as he go through a self-conscious journey, a self-discovery journey, let's say. I believe there was a message in the movie they were trying to deliver to us, but they failed. I felt like they were trying to deliver something about vengeance, corruption. They wanted us as audience to travel with Batman as he ventures through his journey and self-discovery. But I thought ultimately they could not do that, and they failed. I failed to grasp any changes in Batman character between the beginning of the movie and the end of the movie. And probably this is because, again, the complex interwoven subplots, multiple storylines, lack of chemistry, and lack of emotional intensity. And that's where I think the movie again failed. And what about the 3 hours runtime? I mean, I think again the executives or the producers were thinking, hey, let's make the movie too long and overstretch it, which would justify a theatrical release. Thinking about it again, I would have thought that this movie would have worked better if it was released in parts as a miniseries in a streaming platform, maybe Netflix or whatever. So having it released in parts as a miniseries and perhaps even adding more hours to it, maybe they could have created more depth, especially that the movie again doesn't have anything spectacular to justify its theatrical release. So why not release it on a platform as a miniseries? Or alternatively, on the other hand, they could have focused on one subplot, for example, the Riddler subplot, the detective work, and just focus on that, shortening the runtime to maybe 90 minutes. I think that would be a good start for a new Batman that we are introduced to. So I think that these are my opinions, and I think these would have made the movie a little bit better and more acceptable than the 3 hours long film. Again, every time I think about it, where did the 3 hours go? I can't fathom what happened during these 3 hours. Nothing really solid happened or crystallized there. So we go back now again to our very first question in this review. Is Batman worth all the hype? In my opinion, I think not. It is definitely a good movie, don't get me wrong, but it's not a great one. And based on the reviews, the ratings I've been reading and seeing, I think it's a bit overrated. I have to say, the marketing people behind this movie did an excellent job. I mean, that's why a lot of people are going to see it. This movie is definitely gonna make a lot of money. It's gonna be a success. It's gonna work, it's gonna bring in money, and I really do hope the sequel, and I bet you there will be a sequel, will be executed in a much better manner. That's all for today, and take care.